Learning the Japanese language takes months, years of hard study. There's no ways of cutting corners, you can't shortcut it to take down the language barrier. But what I hope to do in this video is take down the cultural barrier, because whilst I can't teach you thousands of words in kanji or grammar concepts in this video, what I can do is teach you three concepts of Japanese culture that should hopefully make things a little bit more easy to understand in Japan and the way people do things here. I remember the first time I met my school principal when I was an English teacher. I went in and it was all rather scary, it was very intimidating. I went in, sat down opposite him, and we had a nice little chat about why I came to Japan, why I was there, what I wanted to do. And then all of a sudden, after about 3 or 4 minutes of conversation, he just went silent, just silence. The longest 30-second awkward silence I've ever had. Now at first I thought I'd done something wrong. I thought I'd done some sort of faux pas that I didn't know about, and I'd pissed him off because there was no other explanation for. I was just sort of sitting there like this, staring at the ground in silence, just me and him. It was really weird. I thought I'd done something wrong. A few weeks later, it happened again in my first meeting with my English teachers, with the Japanese teachers of English that I worked with. We were sitting around a table talking about lesson plans and things, and after about 5 to 10 minutes of talking, everyone just went silent. Again, all 3 or 4 people that I was with just went silent, and I sat there again, 20 to 30 seconds, just wondering what was going on, sort of looking around like, yeah, just nodding awkwardly, as though I was agreeing with something that wasn't even being said. It was really surreal. And again, I thought I'd done something wrong. I thought it was a faux pas. So afterwards, I asked one of my teachers that I worked with, what just went on there? What was that? And he said, well, that's, in Japan, we have a lot of silence when we talk. We call it chinmoku. And that's the first thing I wanted to teach you, chinmoku, because I think a lot of people encounter it here and they don't know what it is. But it is a thing that exists. It's not just an awkward silence. It is a thing rooted into Japanese culture, chinmoku. It turns out this silent contemplation is born out of 2 things. Number 1 is Zen Buddhism, which is rooted heavily in Japanese culture. It's taught that truth can never be said. It's found in silence. Truth exists in silence. I don't really know what that means. It sounds rather poetic. But I suspect the second reason is the more important one. And that is simply that Japan is a collectivist culture. Therefore, people don't like speaking their opinions so much. People like to reach a consensus first before speaking their mind and saying their opinion. And chinmoku is said to kind of reinforce that group consciousness and sense of harmony. Instead of people just throwing out their opinions, they're a lot more restrained, and as a result, you never really see people arguing. But I'll get to that further on, because the third concept I want to discuss kind of ties in nicely. What I want to say is basically, if you're in a meeting, business meeting, or you're at work, and everybody goes quiet for 20 to 30 seconds, don't worry, you haven't messed up, you haven't made a faux pas, it's just the way people communicate here. Chinmoku is just an essential part of communication in Japanese culture. There's a reason Japan runs like clockwork. The trains are always on time, the food is always great quality, the service quality itself is done with robotic precision every time. I first came across the phrase high uncertainty avoidance when I was studying business and linguistics at university. It's a very famous study done by a guy called Hofstede, who worked for IBM, and he travelled the world looking for cultural traits in different countries where IBM was based. It's a fascinating study, well worth the read, but it led me to understand the kind of underlying dynamics that make Japan work, and understand the cultural traits that have come about as a result of high uncertainty avoidance. Basically, what it means, people in Japan don't like uncertainty, they don't like spontaneity, they don't like things being unpredictable. Hence, Japan is rooted in tradition and a little bit closed-minded towards the outside world and new concept. It's neither a good thing nor a bad thing inherently, I think, but it's an important thing to grasp and understand. I'll give you a few examples. Number 1, back in the UK, when it comes to meeting up with friends, I'll just fire off a message and say, hey guys, do you want to meet up for a drink? Do you want to hang out? And they will. They'll, come at a moment's notice, nice and spontaneous. In Japan, when I meet up with a friend, it feels like it has to be specially reserved and booked ahead of time, sometimes up to a week in advance. There just isn't that level of spontaneity here. Things kind of take a lot more timing and scheduling. Number 2, customer service in Japan is excellent unless you go off script and order something that isn't on the menu, or modify your order a little bit, and then everything just falls apart. Watch the staff panic and run in fear as you order a burger without pickles or a burger without cheese or something. It all just falls apart, and don't be surprised when it does. And third is entrepreneurship. People in Japan don't really like entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship here is rarer. Whilst in the West we see entrepreneurship and the risks that come with it as opportunities to be seized. We look at the gains and the good side that comes with it. In Japan, it's seen as a big, risky, scary thing, and people are kind of reluctant to try something new. So, for example, if you end up teaching English in Japan and you have some radical ideas about how you'd like to teach English, or you'd like to avoid using textbooks, as I did, you might find that teachers are reluctant to embrace your ideas. I mean, I tried to get my students doing things like making magazines and making short films, practically using the English they knew in fun and exciting ways. And some of the teachers loved the idea, others were very reluctant and didn't want to do it because it represented uncertainty and going off track and doing something a little bit different. But just be mindful of this aspect of the culture, because whilst it's important to rock the boat, to get things done, at the same time, just make sure if you are rocking the boat and trying something innovative, you're not pissing off the people around you along the way. Now, I've just spent the last point talking about how high uncertainty avoidance is rooted in the culture. And this next point contradicts it entirely. So take everything I've just told you and throw it out the window. In Japan, when somebody objects to something, they'll very, very rarely straight up just say no. They will kind of hedge the conversation and use all sorts of weird euphemisms. The favourite being, oh, it's difficult. Oh, it's difficult. They'll just say that over and over, and you don't know what's going on, but it's difficult. And that'll be the end of it. Case in point, again, when I go back to my experience of teaching, I wanted to go off the beaten track, not use textbooks, do something fun, do something practical with my students. I said I wanted to get my students writing this student magazine in English, and they went, oh, oh, it's difficult. I was like, what's difficult? What aspect of it? You let me know, we can find a way around it. But what they actually meant was, no, we're not doing the magazine idea, end of discussion, that's the end of it. They could have just said that. Would have been a lot easier. But in Japan, there is this concept of ambiguity, aimai, that resonates through every conversation you have. People are very indirect with their intentions and what they're thinking, and it can cause just a remarkable amount of confusion. Even when going to a restaurant, you'll see this kind of unfold. Numerous of the times I've gone into a restaurant, asked for a table for one, because I have no friends, I spend most of my time alone. And instead of giving me a table or saying there are no tables because the restaurant's full, they'll just stare at the screen like this and go, And all the map of the restaurant, all the tables, they'll stare at it and go, oh, Rather than just telling me there's no tables available. It's because people are being polite, but it's really annoying, and you have to learn to take the hint and try and read the air. In Japan, and try and get to the bottom of somebody's intention. They're not going to be direct. Often they will be ambiguous. I've heard that geography was just a key factor in why this happened historically. Japan hasn't got a lot of space. People used to work in small groups to toil away in the rice fields and keep things going. And if you spoke your mind, if you pissed people off, you got left out from the group, you didn't have any feed, and then you died. So it's important to have a sense of harmony, keep your opinions to yourself, and one of the best ways of doing that was just being ambiguous, not putting your opinion out there until you understood the group consensus. So there are key, clear historical reasons for why this developed. Aimai is just regarded as a simple virtue in Japan. And if you ask somebody about it, a Japanese person, they might be a little bit confused, unless they've travelled and lived and worked overseas themselves, in which case they understand the difference between Western culture and Japanese culture. My advice is just to be patient and try and grasp the nuance, try and get the hint. Another example, when I was working as a teacher, outside of the summer months, I often just wore a t-shirt, because I get hot and I like wearing t-shirts. But you're not allowed to do that. I didn't know that the rules were you had to wear a long sleeve t-shirt. Nobody told me that. They could have just said, oh Chris, wear a long sleeve t-shirt. But instead, for about 3 or 4 months every day, numerous teachers came up to me and said, oh, you must be cold, Chris. Oh, you must be cold. They were hinting that I was breaking the rules, but rather than telling me, they were being quite ambiguous and annoying about it. So try and read the air. Do read up on Aimai before you come to Japan, because if you are working in the Japanese work environment, it's going to cause a lot of confusion and problems along the way. So those are 3 key aspects of Japanese culture I recommend bearing in mind. There's certainly a lot more, and I'll be covering more in future videos. But the key to succeeding in Japan is just being mindful. Things here are done very differently, but if you adapt to the way they're done, I think it's a lot easier to forge connections and build your life here. But that's all for now, guys. I'll speak to you in a future video, but for now, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.